So Kimberly Fuqua is coming up next, as you can see, and her Bold Talk is on leadership skills in the AI era. Okay, this is AI. We all know that it's something that impacts all of our lives. She's from Luminous Leaders in Microsoft. And so please, so we can stay on time, if you can just join me in a warm virtual welcome for Kimberly Fuqua, Leadership Skills in the AI Era, Cultural Intelligence Required. Kimberly, I pass it on to you.
Excellent. All right. I want to start here. Many people think that the biggest risk of AI is that it's going to replace humans. I don't believe that. I don't think that's the biggest threat that we face with artificial intelligence. I actually think the most pressing concern we have is that AI will scale our poor leadership skills faster than we can fix them. By 2030, nearly 40% of core job skills will change. Skills like communication and decision-making and creativity, and even how we build our relationships and trust. And yet, we are moving, as we've talked about throughout this entire day, we're moving faster than ever before. We're writing faster, responding faster, deciding faster. But we're doing it without asking this critical question. Are we actually understanding each other better? I've worked in tech for almost 30 years, and I've worked across and led across global teams. And I've seen firsthand how cultural intelligence drives success across different contexts and complex situations in the workplace. And despite the efforts of some of our governments and politicians to isolate and divide us as humans, we are living and working and leading in a globally connected world. We often talk about emotional intelligence in leadership. Emotional intelligence is just the ability to understand and manage emotions in ourselves and in others. And that truly matters. Emotional intelligence, EQ, is important. But in the globally connected world we're operating in today, cultural intelligence is vitally important to help leaders understand and adapt across different cultures, contexts, and ways of thinking. And the reality is, you can be emotionally intelligent and still completely misread the situation, especially if you don't understand the cultural context of that situation. You can have empathy and you can still get it completely wrong. Cultural intelligence is the ability to read the room, even or maybe especially when that room has people of difference, people with many different cultures, contexts, and expectations. It's really about knowing when difference matters and then responding accordingly with the right insight, the right judgment, and grace. Several years ago, global bank HSBC launched a campaign with a very simple message. It was assume nothing. And that message was clear, it was direct, many people thought it was very professional. But when that message was translated across different countries, it became do nothing. And then HSBC had to do something by spending $10 million to fix that mistake. And that happened back in 2009. Back then, it moved at the speed of humans. It was a bit slower. It was something that could, a little bit more fixable. It was contained. But if that same mistake had happened today, it would have moved at the speed of AI. One of those messages or that single message becomes thousands across multiple platforms and communication channels, and one misunderstanding becomes global, not in months, but in minutes. And now we are using technology to do much more than just translate messages. We're now using AI to make very important decisions. A few years ago, Amazon was using an AI recruiting tool designed to hire faster, smarter, and supposedly more objectively. But the system started ranking female candidates lower if their resumes included the word women. So that means anything that said women's colleges or women's leadership programs. And we wonder why. Why was that happening? That was happening because their AI tool had been trained on historical training data, and that data reflected the male-dominated workforce at Amazon. In that case, AI did not remove bias. It learned it, and then it scaled it. Now let's connect the dots. HSBC shows us what happens when meaning does not translate across countries and cultures. Amazon shows us what happens when bias goes unnoticed, unchecked, and just does not get questioned. Different situations, but it's the same leadership failure. It's a failure to understand how messages and decisions are experienced across cultures, across identities, and across realities. And there's a shift we have to make as leaders, because in the era of AI, misunderstanding doesn't just create confusion, it creates consequences at scale. We need to understand that AI is not just transforming leadership. It's making visible what effective and ineffective leadership looks like. What HSBC and Amazon examples show us very clearly is this point. Cultural intelligence is no longer a nice to have. I don't know that it ever was, but it is definitely the operating system for leadership in the AI era. Now, I want you to take a minute and just think about how you and how we are using AI today. We're using it to write messages, to summarize conversations, recommend decisions, screen candidates, coach people, and the list goes on and on and on. And we're doing that all across cultures, all across contexts, all across our differences. And there's an assumption we make in many cases that that output is neutral. Well, let me tell you, that output is not neutral. In fact, research shows that AI often reflects a very narrow set of cultural norms, even if it sounds globally fluent. A 2024 review of large language models across 107 countries found that model outputs by default resemble values associated with English-speaking and Protestant European contexts. In other words, AI may sound globally fluent while remaining very culturally narrow and leaving out 85% of the humans in the world. And that really matters because the most dangerous bias in leadership communication is usually not offensive language. It is typically the so-called professional language that treats one cultural style as the standard. And this means the more we rely on AI, the more cultural intelligence really matters. The most challenging concern is not offensive language. It's professional language that assumes one way of thinking and one way of communicating is the norm. So take a minute and imagine you're a manager of a global team using AI to write a performance review for your team members in various parts of the world. And don't think this doesn't happen, because it does. And AI may produce a polished document, an efficient performance review, and maybe even well written. But what you get from this AI generated performance review is one team member thinking, oh, it's very clear for me. Another team member thinking, this is disrespectful. And yet another one hears, my manager has already made the decision without my input. And that's the moment where leadership requires spot-on cultural intellect to properly translate the meeting. Or you can become a leader that has to manage damage control. I've had some similar situations to manage as a leader in tech. Recently, I was working on a project to repair a relationship with a very important customer. And I soon realized that I was dealing with a cultural iceberg. On the surface, it looked like a typical situation. Complex technical issues, a frustrated customer, multiple teams from the customer and from our company were both involved. But underneath, it was far more complex because the customer was based in one part of the world and our engineering team was based in another. And due to legal and cultural realities, those two groups could not engage directly with one another. Their respective countries couldn't even make phone calls to each other legally. So now think about that as a leader. You're trying to resolve a critical issue, but the two groups that need to work together can't even be in the same conversation. And AI could help me summarize that issue, sure. It could organize timelines and structure a project plan for me. But what it could not tell me is who should speak to whom, what should be said, what should not be said, and when my direct involvement was needed to progress the situation faster. That kind of decision required judgment, human judgment. It required cultural awareness, and it required an understanding of not just the problem, but the people, the context, and the consequences. AI gave me the information. Cultural intelligence gave me the judgment. And that's what effective leadership looks like right now. That's what it should look like. Not just using AI, but knowing how to lead when AI simply is not enough. The role of the leader has changed. We're moving from leaders who provide answers and great reporting and understand the data to leaders who translate what those answers and data actually mean. If an AI algorithm has access to the right data, sure, it can be very good at providing answers that come from that data. It can summarize meetings, generate insights, recommend actions, even draft some decisions faster than humans ever could. But it cannot tell you what those answers actually mean in a human context. It can't tell you who may have been missing from the conversation, what may have been misunderstood, and what's left unsaid. And it definitely cannot tell you about the lived experience of the people in that situation. And we're already seeing this. People are moving faster than ever with AI, but they're also feeling less productive. Because for many people in today's workplace, productivity isn't just about output. It's about clarity. It's about ownership. It's about deriving value, purpose, and meaning from our work. And we need to understand that the leader's job has fundamentally changed from being the smartest person with all the great reporting in the room to being the person who makes sense of the people and the differences and the culture and the context in the room. An AI summary of a meeting can tell you what was said, what decisions were made, who spoke the most, but it cannot tell you who felt dismissed, who felt unheard, who felt unseen, and who decided it may not have been safe to contribute. And that is the data that determines whether your team succeeds or fails. In the AI era, the best, most impactful leaders are not just decision makers. They are interpreters of meaning across people, context, and consequence. The future of leadership is not about having more answers. It's about knowing what the answers mean. Now, once you start interpreting the meaning, then the question becomes, can people trust what you do with that interpretation? Trust is the infrastructure of scale, and it is the infrastructure in the AI era. Cultural intelligence helps you understand difference. Interpretation helps you make sense of the information that AI is giving you. But trust, that determines whether people accept your interpretation. Because if people don't feel understood, they don't trust your decisions. And if they don't trust your decisions, they won't follow your decisions. AI can scale decisions, but only trust can scale adoption. And listen, folks, trust doesn't come from speed. Yes, AI is fast, but trust doesn't come from that. It doesn't come from polished communication. It comes from people believing that they were understood in the process. That is cultural intelligence in action. Now, interpretation without cultural intelligence may be technically correct, but still at the same time be completely misaligned. And the people impacted by those decisions will always ask, was I understood? Were my ideas valued? Was this fair to me? And can I trust this person? Can I trust these decisions? If we're serious about bold work, if we truly believe in a brave future, and if we truly believe in justice for all, then trust must not be assumed. It must be built through cultural intelligence and how we interpret what AI gives us. AI gives us speed. Cultural intelligence gives us direction. Interpretation gives us meaning. And trust is what determines whether any of that works. Without trust, scale does not create progress. It creates risk. And then you have another question you need to ask yourself, and we all need to ask ourselves. And that's, how can we avoid, or at the very least, manage and mitigate that risk? My suggestion, my recommendation, is to take one simple action of, before communicating your next AI generated email, before generating your next summary, your next policy, or even your next hiring decision, take a moment. Be curious and reflective, and ask yourself a few questions. Is anyone missing that should have been considered? Who could be impacted, hurt, or harmed by the decisions that we're making? And what should a human still fully own? I promise if you practice that, you won't just use AI more effectively. You will lead differently. And you will become the kind of leader people trust, even in the most challenging situations. You will also understand more fully that AI will not determine the future of leadership. The quality of our leadership will determine what AI becomes. Thank you, and I'm open to any questions at this point.
Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you, Kimberly, for that very real, informative, and instructive conversation around AI. For the bold talks, Q&As are
no
not
questions.
Q&A are not baked in. Oh, you already right. You read my mind. However, we do encourage folk. I'm sure you have questions. I have questions. So we do encourage folks to please reach out to Kimberly directly with your questions around her presentation, around cultural intelligence and AI. And Kimberly, if you're open to it, you can share I know that you can go to the connections tab in the lobby to get her information. But Kimberly, if you feel, she's already put her email.
I just shared my email.
You're one step ahead. All right. Thank you so much. Chad, you have so much energy. Great work, full future. Yes.